We begin with the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and we send salutations and peace on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Israel-Palestine war. Today, I wanted to look at the role of the United Kingdom, the British Empire, historically, and up until present time, in contributing to what we are seeing today. In December of 2023, and the UN and also the US. Let's travel back in time to 1918, 30 years before the 1948 Balfour Declaration. The British Empire was ruling over the area of Palestine with its indigenous Arab population intact. It just took over. This indigenous population of Arabs has been there for over 5 millenniums. 5,000 years. This rule was happening under the League of Nations. They had a mandate, a written document. And at this time, only a small minority were Jews. Very small. And under the term of this mandate by the League of Nations, more and more Jews, which are the minority, are brought in over the next few days, weeks, years. So the British occupied Palestine in 1917. Previous to 1917, it was the Ottoman Empire, Islamic Empire. So under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, the Palestinian Arab population had the ability to elect representatives. They had a government, they had a state. And those would report to the Ottoman Empire. So it has its own media outlets. It was a developing, growing country, hospitals, education systems. They were a poor country. They had hospitals, they had education institutes, but it was developing. It was developing as it went. So initially, everything was going smoothly. And then the British arrived. And they arrived with a mandate of the League of Nations. And in that mandate, it states very clearly, this area of Palestine is to be designated the new Jewish national home. There is no mention of the Palestinians. There is no mention of the original people that are living there in the Balfour Declaration or in the mandate of the League of Nations. No mention at all. And here we take a simple analogy. Imagine a glass that is filled with milk to the brim. And then you have another liquid, let's say oil. Oil and milk don't mix together. Now you want to place in that same glass an entire glass of oil. What's going to happen? Inevitably, you either need to remove some milk to put the oil in to occupy that space, or you remove all the milk and you just fill it with oil. This process can happen slowly or all at once. Doesn't really matter. In this analogy, the milk is the original indigenous Arab people in Palestine, which is the cup. The oil, which used to be a few drops, a minority of Jewish settlers, were just floating on the top. And because of this mandate of the League of Nations, later the Balfour Declaration, 1948, this doesn't even mention or say that the glass is already full of milk. They're like, there's nothing in there. It's empty. The land is empty. Inevitably, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to spill over. The milk is going to spill. And that container cannot contain both liquids. This is what has happened. Simple. So in 1917, Britain comes into the picture and it takes over the land. 94% of the population of Palestine is original Arab Palestinian population. 94%. They have their own government, own hospital system, own education system, all under the previous empire of the Ottomans. Now the only thing that changes is the managers. British Empire comes in. They come in with a mandate of the League of Nations. From this period, from 1917, when the population is 94% Arab, all the way to 1948, which is the time of the Balfour Declaration, the population there drops magically to 65%. How did this happen? And it's filled in with Israelis. Israeli migrants that were just a few drops. 1917 to 1948, magically they appear. And at the same time, in the background, Central and Eastern Europe, Zionism starts under Theodore Herzl. And he has made the focus on establishing what? An Israeli state. And this movement in the background, in the backdrop, is gaining traction, gaining favoritism. So by World War I, this became the focus of the Zionist movement. We need a state called Israel. They considered other places, other geographic locations, which I went through before. But they decided on Palestine as the place, because it had a religious significance to them as well, just like it has for Islam, just like it has for Christianity. So the question arises, why on earth did the British people agree for this state to exist in the first place? When the land was already full, why did they choose that? The first reason is that they needed a strategic military base in the middle of Middle East. They need to protect themselves from the East by having a strategic point right in the middle of the Muslims. Long before they even partnered up with the Zionists, they wanted to control the Mediterranean route into the Gulf. The land route, the only land route to get into the Gulf is through Palestine. Now, Britain already controlled the Suez Canal, which is the sea route in Egypt, into the same place. So they wanted to build railway, roads, and have some form of access to get into the Gulf, where the Muslims are living. So now they can protect themselves from threats from the East. Now, the evangelist Christians, they started to feel like a responsibility. What do we do about this Jewish problem? The Jews are spread all over Europe at that time. And some of them felt a duty towards the Jews. At the same time, the same Christians felt anti-Semitic. They don't like the Jews. So they refer to the Jews as a problem. So enter in Balfour. What do you know about Balfour? He was the foreign secretary in 1917. In 1905, he was the prime minister of Britain in UK. He is the same person that passed the Alien Exclusion Act. Do you know what this states? Any Jew that has been displaced from the Russian Empire are not allowed to enter as refugees into the British Empire. Ever! Is that anti-Semitic? Yes! This is probably the most anti-Semitic laws that was passed in British history. This is the basis of the guy who's formed the Balfour Declaration. So number one, they wanted a strategic point in the middle of the Muslims. And the second is that the Jewish problem needed to be solved. The only way to solve the problem, to stop them from coming to the UK, is what? Give them another place to go to. It solves both problems. This is where the Balfour Declaration came in. Before the Balfour Declaration, what do you think from 1917 to 1948? They had their own nation, own state, own hospitals, own schools. What do you think they were doing? They were like, we are sick and tired of being treated like we don't exist. And more Jews are coming in, and more of our people are being kicked out. So at the time, the Palestinians as a nation went up to the British Empire. They said, look, your mandate from the League of Nations doesn't even mention us as a people. We live here. And you're about to settle and make this a Jewish homeland. What about us? You know what their reply was? You're not mentioned in the mandate, on the document, so therefore you don't exist. Mashallah, we don't exist. So the Palestinians went back. And what do you think they did? They rose up against the British. From 1917 to the late 1930s, the Palestinians were fighting and rising up. And it got so bad that most of the territory of Palestine was lost by the British Empire to the Palestinians. Freedom fighters. Now the British Empire could not send forces against the Palestinian people. Why? Because at the same time Hitler was taking over Austria. And they couldn't let their troops go. They didn't have enough troops. They had to hold them in reserve. And at the same time they couldn't send their Indian troops. Why? Because they thought that the Indians would be sympathetic towards the Palestinians. They want a freedom state, just like us. But finally, they were able to send 100,000 of their troops. They used savage tactics to stop the Palestinian uprising. You know what they did? The Royal Army and the Royal Navy, 100,000 troops. They started burning whole suburbs. They would blow up the homes, kill prisoners, execute them. Put thousands of people in concentration camps. Who started this? You think Israel started this? No! The British Empire started this. And this was becoming a burden by the end of the 1930s for the British Empire. And at that time, they released a white paper which pulled back on their commitment to the Zionist cause. So they had originally promised the Zionists that you're going to have a homeland. But then they produced this paper that we're not going to really do that. Now the Jews responded to that, the Zionists responded to that by saying what? We're against you now, the British Empire. So now you have the original Arabs, Palestinians, fighting the British Empire, and now you also have the Zionists fighting the British Empire. So they have to fight two people now. Haganah was the example of a Zionist militia that was trained by the British people in the British Empire to gain control over the Palestinians. But they rejected it, and they started fighting the British Empire. Now they turned against the British Empire. This is at the end of 1940. So from 1939 all the way till 1947, this is happening. They're fighting both the Palestinians and they're fighting the Zionist Jews as well. And this took a tremendous toll. In 1947, you know what the UK government did? The Britons did? This is not our problem anymore. I'm just going to walk away. Okay, UN, why don't you deal with it? United Nations, come and save the day. We're just going to walk away. You know what the UN did? The UN partitions the country. And it gives most of the area to the minority at the time, which is the Jewish minority. 35% of the population was Jewish. The remainder was non-Jewish. The original Arab indigenous people, 65%. These 65% said, don't we get a state? Don't we get a government? They said no. That's right. They were denied by the UN. So the UN is no better. They made the problem worse. We thought till now that the British Empire was doing a bad job. The UN comes and makes it worse. For who? The original Palestinians get the bad deal. Now what happened next? What do you think? The UN just gave the minority people, the 35%, a governing power. They recognize their government. They give all of the hospitals and education to who? This newly formed states. The original population gets nothing. 65%. No recognition, no state, no government. Zionists come to power. 1948. They established the Israeli state. Legitimate. According to the eyes of the world. Now, you have actively created this Israeli Jewish state in the middle of an Arab majority country. Now begins the task of squeezing the Arabs into a smaller and smaller area until none of them are left. That's the aim of Zionism. Ethnic cleansing has to happen in order for the Jewish state to exist. Now remember, historically, every single time the British Empire partitioned a nation, it was bloody. It was paved in blood. Look at the examples. Palestine, Cyprus, Ireland, India. Every single time they started drawing lines, it was paved in blood. Massive amounts of people are displaced. Refugees all over the world. So here, without going over this again, from the establishment of the Israeli state, 1948, all the way to present day, 2023, was bloody massacres all over the place. I already went through this period previously, so I'm not going to go over it again. So here, I want you to take a moment to look at the Palestinian side of the equation. Did they get a good deal ever? They never got a good deal. They didn't even get a deal. They were told that you don't even exist. Whether it's UK, whether it's the UN, whether it's the US. And they keep giving it to the minorities who are the Jews that are coming as settlers. Of course they're not going to accept the Israeli state. It was unfair to begin with. Imagine people come over, take over your home, and they're like, you don't exist. They were innocent of anti-Semitism. Up until that time in history, do you think the Palestinians were anti-Semitic? They hated the Jews? They didn't even know the Jews existed. They didn't create the Nazis. They didn't create the Holocaust. The anti-Semitism came from where? The British Empire and the US. They didn't want to even accept refugees that were Jews. So now you begin to understand that they closed the doors to even Jewish refugees. They are the ones that started anti-Semitism. They hated the Jews. Palestinians in 1948 owned 94% of the land. They owned the land. And 55% of the country's land was supposed to be given to the Israelis. How is that fair? They own 94% of the land. And you have to give away 55%. That's a lose-lose scenario. Whether it's the British Empire or it's the United Nations. Both of them are giving the worst deal of the century. How could anyone in their right mind say, yes, we accept the Israeli state? Of course they didn't accept the Israeli state. The United Nations in December 1948 realized that what they did was wrong. You know what they did? What did they do? They didn't recognize their government, they didn't give them a state, they didn't even give them an equal share of the land. So what they did was, the United Nations passed another document, a declaration. Every Palestinian can just return back to their home, and this is allowed by the UN. Once this was passed, the United States and the United Nations tried to get Israel to just give back the land. Do you think they gave it back? No. It's too late. Do you think they're just going to willingly give back the land? I don't care if it's USA, the United Nations, the entire world. So it wanted to right the wrongs of 1948, but Israel rejected. They said no. And we don't need you anymore either. Nothing happened. It just kept getting worse. This continued until the 1980s, when the PLO changed and there was an active move to give them a state. Did that work? You hear words like the two-state solution are being thrown around. 1980s till now. It was not because of the Palestinians that this didn't happen. It was because of the Israeli state. This Zionist racist state is the one that never accepted the two-state solution. Let me make this point very clear. The Palestinians were never, ever offered their own state. Period. Not by the United Kingdom, not by the British Empire, not by the US, not by the UN. It never happened. What are you talking about two-state solution? Too bad. You Palestinians are always going to be under military solution. You are never going to get a good deal, ever. People till very recently are saying that the Palestinians are the ones that denied it. The two-state solution was offered, they denied. This is absolute rubbish. They were never ever offered a sovereign state of their own, land of their own, government of their own. They were never offered this. And it is still not on the table even now. And this will give you a brief understanding of what things were like for the Palestinians. Don't think the US government is great. Don't think that the UK are amazing. And what Australia and New Zealand do is just follow what they do. Simple. It's not very difficult to understand this equation. They were always given the worst deal. No wonder they didn't accept it. However, after having discussed these facts of history, I want to direct your attention towards hope. Muslims, what do we hope? The hope we hold is not with the governments, it's with Allah. Muslims will be victorious. How? Rasulullah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ زَوَالِيَ الْأَرْضِ رَأَيْتُ أَنَا مُلْكِي. It's a long hadith. Allah Azza wa Jalla has shown me the entire earth. Allah showed me the entire earth. And he said that the kingdom of my nation will reach everywhere. So this religion, Islam, will reach to every continent, every country, every city, every suburb. The banner of La ilaha illallah will reach everywhere. سَيَبْلُغُ هَذَا الدِّينِ مَنْ بَلَغُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ. This religion will reach wherever night and day reached. Is there a place on earth that night and day doesn't reach? This religion will reach everywhere. So you, me, and then the kafir, the munafiq. If you want to hide away from Islam, you can't find a place on earth to reach where Islam will not go. You have to go to the moon. So we must all agree what? Victory is on its way. A month from now, a year from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, at the end of the day, victory will come. No doubt. But the question is when? So I'm going to make a claim now. And then I'm going to back it up with the proofs of the Quran and the Hadith. The claim is, victory is coming. So let's now prove, is this hypothesis true or not? And I'm going to use the principle of, in aradallahu, if Allah wants an end, a victory, He creates the means, the steps of means. Let's look at history. Does Allah prepare people for events? Does Allah bring circumstances to change a people? Yes. Does Allah help? Yes. There's a hadith in Bukhari by Aisha radiallahu anha. She said, كان يوم بعاث يوم أدمه الله ورسوله فقدم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. It's a very long hadith. It states that he was making da'wah in Mecca. First 13 years he reached a dead end in Mecca. Now the Prophet ﷺ is trying to find a new base. Everyone's turning him down. Every year in Al-Mawsim he would present Islam to the neighboring tribes and ask them, can we come and establish our Islamic state where you are? بَلِّغْ دَعْوَةَ رَبِّي. I wanted to convey the message of my Lord. I want you to provide me with support, protection, so that I can convey the message of Allah. Can you do this? Rejected, 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 rejected. Now Allah wanted this ajr to go to someone. He wanted it to go to the people of Medina, Al-Aws wal-Khazraj, 2 Arab tribes. Aisha radiallahu anha said that we had a battle of Bu'ath. Bu'ath, imagine that there's this Arab state and there's these 2 Arab tribes and they're just fighting each other. There was this really big battle called Bu'ath. Their life was, they would wake up in the morning, go and fight and come back and go to sleep, and then they would wake up the next morning, go and fight and then come and go back to sleep. They continued this war for years. It wore them down. Yes, you could be a tough fighter. You are in a war for years. It tires you. It tires your children. It tires your money. When does it stop? So this was getting too much for the Aus and the Khazraj, these 2 tribes in Medina. Then you have this battle called Bu'ath. This battle between these 2 tribes. Ultimate battle. كَانَ يَوْمَ بُعَاث يَوْمَ أَدَّمَهُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. The day of Bu'ath was a day that Allah has given as a gift for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had nothing to do with Bu'ath. It was in Medina, in another city. And these 2 people were fighting each other. Bu'ath was a day where these 2 tribes fought each other, and the leadership of both tribes were massacred. All the leaders were killed. That's how bloody it was. Al-Aws wal-Khazraj. These 2 tribes in Medina, فَقَدِمَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ. The Prophet ﷺ went to them. Al-Mala is the leadership. The leadership was gone. Imagine all your leaders are dead. And the heads of the people were beheaded. And the people were injured. If you notice, throughout the reading of the Quran, that the ones who stand against the Anbiya are who? The leaders. Al-Mala. In Quran they're called Al-Mala. Al-Mala are the leadership of a people. The political leadership are the ones that are going to stand against the prophets when they come. The social leadership, the political leadership, the military leadership. These are the people that will stand against the prophets. If a prophet comes authentically from Allah, these are the people they have to fight. They do not allow change to the status quo. These leaders are the ones that benefit the most from the status quo. They don't want any change. So they resist the da'wah of the prophets. The Anbiya come and they strip their power away and they give it to Allah. So now you all become equal. And the Khalifa amongst you is the one that is the Prophet of Allah. Who loses? The leaders lose. So Abu Bakr and Umar are not there for their own benefits. They established the book of Allah after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. That is why he is called Mas'ul, the one who is asked. Mas'ul in Arabic means the one that is asked on the Day of Judgment. That's the title given to a leader. Mas'ul. You're a leader, you're going to be asked for sure on the Day of Judgment. This is what Islam says the status of a leader is. You'll be questioned on the Day of Judgment. No one wants to be a leader in Islam. Why? The Khulafa had to be forced to become leaders. Nobody wants to be questioned on the Day of Judgment. Umar was handed the Khilafah by Abu Bakr. And then the people were telling Abdullah ibn Amr to take it. Umar ibn al-Khattab said, after me, my son is not going to take the leadership. You're going to get a group of leaders together and among them you're going to pick. That's how Uthman radiallahu anhu was picked. Are you going to call me to account? 2 people in my family are going to be on the Day of Judgment? Answering for being leaders? Abu Lahab, Umayyah bin Khalaf, Fir'aun. Who are these people? These are leaders. They benefit from the status quo, the position. They benefit fame. They're benefiting respect. So these are the leaders, are the ones that stand to lose when a prophet comes into the equation. In reality, when people think they are free, they are not free. You are living under a man-made system. You are not free. That is why when Rib'i ibn Amir went to the leader of the Persians, and the leader of the Persians said, why are you coming to our land? If you're coming for money, we will pay you your wage and salary. The Muslims said, we are not here to take money from you. We are sent to free the creation from being slaves to one another, to being slaves of Allah. This is the core of Islam. The Sahaba were going into other lands, why? To spread what? Islam. They didn't want money. To the oppression of you ruling each other, to the freedom of Islam, the justice of Islam. So all religions are dhulm, except one, Islam. Even if I don't know what it is going to be injustice in it. وَمِنْ جَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ مَعَ الْأَدْنَى. We are taking the people from the oppression of religion to Islam. And we want to deliver a people from the narrowness of this world to the vastness of this world and the hereafter. This is our goals. We looked at the Zionist goals. These are our goals in Islam. That is why when men from Al-Ansar went to Hajj and they heard about the message of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what did they say? They said, let's take this man to our land where Allah will unite us under his banner. Because they had no leadership. And subhanAllah, humanity without leadership cannot survive. Humanity needs leaders. And that is why the camp of Ar-Rahman has leadership. And the camp of the Shaitan has leadership as well. That is our nature. Human beings have to have leaders. Somebody should show us the way. So the Ansar were lost because they lost all their leaders. Also, another form of preparation was the Jews. The Jews would constantly tell that 2 Arab tribes that there is a prophet about to come. The Ansar, the Arabs, used to hear that a prophet is about to come. And when he comes, we're going to kill you like Ad and Thamud. Just wait until the prophet comes, we're going to slaughter all of you. That's what the Jews used to say to the people of Medina, the natives. Allah Azza wa Jal wanted not the Jews to become the followers of the Prophet ﷺ. He wanted the Ansar to become the Prophet followers. The Ansar were fighting in Bu'ath. They had no clue that this day would bring them closer to Islam. It was a war in Jahiliyyah. It was bringing them closer to what? Islam. And this is the exact same hope that I put to you today. When you watch the news, when you watch the media, when you watch the social problems that are happening all over the world, not just in Palestine. The war that's happening in Palestine, that's on one side. Then there is when you go back to looking at what's happening in Pakistan, what's happening in India, what is happening in Abu Dhabi, what is happening in Saudi Arabia, what is happening in Indonesia, Malaysia. When you look at the state of the ummah in general, are you coming out happy from that exposure, or are you coming out even sadder than when you went in? In this context, there is still hope. Just like there was hope for these two tribes that were battling each other so ruthlessly that they killed off their own leaders. There was hope then, and there is hope now. And we do not rely on anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do not rely on the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the rest of the world, Russia, China, the Muslim states. We do not rely on any of them. What are the action points that we take away? The same as last time. Work on yourself. Commit to your own tawbah. Go back from this khutbah and pray 2 rak'ahs called Salat al-Tawbah. Ask Allah, beg Allah, oh Allah, I have been on the fence. And these Muslims in Palestine, by giving the lives of themselves, their children, being blown to smithereens, have shown me what Iman looks like in 2023. This is what Iman is supposed to look like, and this is where I am. This is where I need to reach, this is where I am. Oh Allah, just take me up to this level. And on that journey to that level, what you need to do is you need to change the way you look, the way you act, the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you move, the way you do business. And everything needs to happen for one goal. Ittiba' al-Rasul. How can I follow the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Because if he was able to change these two fighting tribes, bickering tribes, fighting for years in an endless war, and he was able to come in, offer them Islam, and they became 2/3 of the ruling world on earth. This is possible for us as well. And are we low in number nowadays? 2 billion out of 8 billion? 1/4 of the earth's population is Muslim. Are we weak? No. The problem is not weakness, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. The problem is commitment to that same cause that came and saved us then, is the same cause is that going to save us now. Start changing the way your family is. Start affecting the communities around you. Don't just be selfish. Be selfless. Do things for other people. Go out and tell the people around you, your work colleagues, your non-Muslim colleagues, your friends. Go out and protest. Make the best effort with whatever tools Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, whether it be social media, whether it be your tongue, whether it be just thinking badly of what's happening in your heart as something bad. Our Muslim brothers and sisters are being massacred, and we wake up every day with a nice coffee and a nice tea and a nice suit and a nice shower. Subhanallah, at this point, 500 refugees in Australia have been given a visa in a refugee status. I'm working with a few organizations trying to get them to come to Melbourne. 500 of them are coming to Melbourne, 300 of which are going to Sydney. 271 doctors and healthcare professionals came together and they said, we will offer our services for free. These people have been injured, traumatized, mentally traumatized. Alhamdulillah wa shukrullah, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see when these people come to our shores, what are we going to do? How are we going to behave? That's going to be our test. We don't get missile after missile. This is our test. That's all we get. Are you going to now reach into your pocket and take out something? Are you going to go over there with your blankets? Are you going to go over there and help them? You all own businesses. You are rich. You have everything at your disposal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you much. What are you going to do at this time? Because wallahi, by the grace and mercy of Allah, we are experiencing history happen in front of our eyes. You thought the Nakba was bad. 750,000 Palestinians were displaced. 1.7 million have been displaced now in front of our eyes. In the last 50 days, 1.6 million. People say don't use the word Nakba. The Nakba is happening right now. The single greatest event in the history that me and you in our lives is going to happen in the Muslim Ummah is happening now. How are you going to behave, O Muslims? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.